Shivering Isles is exactly how an Elder Scrolls setting should look and feel in a game, and is possibly the best version of Elder Scrolls that ever was. If you ignore Morrowind, which dice roll deniers often do, as well as ignore Daggerfall, much in the same manner that people who ramble about Daggerfall are ignored by their family and caregivers. Now give me just a minute, criminal scum. This isn't Oblivion Remastered, I get it. We all wanna see the new toy being put through its paces, but let us not forget whence we came. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And I'm drawing a line in the sand against commercialism, against consumerism, against cultism, and vow not to part with a single septim and to never purchase this slap in the face of our collective cultural past until Lover's Lab releases some more immersion mods for me. A major problem with vanilla Oblivion, as well as Skyrim, unfortunately, is how derivative the world building and narrative became of already established cultural powerhouses like Lord of the Rings and Empress Theresa. Former Bethesda writer and Reddit darling Michael Kirkbride has a quote about how the Imperial City and Cyrodiil initially was supposed to look like. Wetlands, swamps, and more jungle than you could shake a Daedric stick at. The Imperial City bustling with every race, culture, and vendor conceivable. Then Todd watched The Fellowship of the Ring, and mistakes were made. Mind you, those mistakes still resulted in one of my all-time favorite games, and a game I will continuously return to, even as I myself start needing caregivers. And we obviously have to take into account what the engine was and was not capable of back then. But there is no denying the generic aesthetic of Oblivion, putting it diplomatically, especially since Morrowind came out 4 years earlier and succeeded massively in constructing a believable yet alien world for us to explore. Enter the Shivering Isles. Or reinstalling Morrowind for the 100th time, trying to recapture the same spark of life you possessed when you were a kid. I want a soapbox about Shivering Isles perfectly encapsulating how and what the Elder Scrolls setting and lore should look like in a game, through the world building and the big man himself. Be aware, this video is going to be an absolute glaze fest. But first, a quick synopsis of the game. I promise not to drag on too much before the juicy lore, but the Grey March situation is truly crazy. Shivering Isles is a 2007 expansion by Bethesda to their highly successful Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Mind you, this is not just an added questline to the base game and some new swag. This is a completely new area with completely new enemies, environments, and even one entire new voice actor.
Ah, silly me. The book has no pictures. Can't really expect you to read that now, can I?
Sort of. You are the hero of Kvatch. Presumably. There is no minimum level or main game requirement to do Shivering Isles, but most people will prefer to first progress through the entirety of the main game. Maybe you are also simultaneously the Archmage of Oblivion, the listener of the Dark Brotherhood, the mythical Grey Fox, and the proud owner of horse armor. A career outlook realistic only to Elder Scrolls protagonists, hard-working, industrious, bald guys, and Todd Howard himself. In the Neben Bay, just outside of Gravel, a talking portal has suddenly appeared, spitting out madmen and catwomen galore. No, your skooma hasn't gone bad again, Schwitt. This is the work of Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. Immediately, Shivering Isles distances itself from the more tradcore Oblivion intro, which featured dreams of premonitions, ancient cults, and goblins. Here, you come face to face with a bored bureaucrat, screening you like a less intrusive TSA agent. He is Chamberlain, not the Neville kind, to Sheogorath, who seeks a champion to withstand a non-specific cataclysm. And having already spent your hard-earned dollars on the game, you of course agree. The Shivering Isles is Sheogorath's domain, the realm of madness. But madness is not a single continuous note of gibbering, drooling, manic insanity, nor the perfect image of demented paranoia and decay, but rather a duality. Mania, the creative, eccentric, and humorous side of Sheogorath, while dementia, the dark, deeply paranoid, and unhinged. This isn't just an incorporeal vibes-based concept. The very lands of madness reflect this in a perfect visual split. Most noticeable in the physical incarnations of dementia and mania made guardians of the Isles. The Orioles or Golden Saints led by the Duke of Mania, Phaedon, and the Maskin, commonly referred to by their very appropriate name, Dark Seducers, led by the Duchess of Dementia, Spiky Goth Mummy, ooh please step on me, linktree and description. There is even the town of Splits, a place where every unlucky inhabiting Croat was divided into the two extremes of madness by a passing Serbian sorcerer. Man, Tesla sure is weird. Suffice to say that mania and dementia are both manifested very visibly, both in the stark aesthetic difference of the lands and cities, the different inhabitants of each corresponding side, and the different quests you encounter, all coalescing at New Sheoth, a large town containing both sides of madness as well as the palace where Sheogorath and his Duke and Duchess reigns from. The calamity approaching Sheogorath's realm is the Grey March, an invasion by the Daedric Prince of Order, Jigalak, occurring and reoccurring at the end of every era that utterly destroys the Shivering Isles, forcing Sheogorath to rebuild his home completely every single time like a true Floridian. On its surface, you might be put off by the seeming abundance of the holds-up Spork, Penguin of Doom variety of random humor, and granted,
Sad fork. Sad big head.
isolated, you might find the butter spread a little too thick for your taste, particularly from Sheo himself and the citizens of Mania. Conversely, the citizens of Dementia often seem to fall slightly too far on the edgy grimdark spectrum.
My lord has a real edge I'd like to cut myself on.
And she is even called Cutter too, did J.K. Rowling name her. But the point is not to take the elements of Shivering Isles in isolation. The realm of madness is not solely mania, bright, saturated and ridiculous, nor is it only dementia, decayed, paranoid and too edgy for me. The Isles are a microcosm of what makes the Elder Scrolls setting so special. Not ridiculous, not generic, not grim dank, but measures of all. If it was only one of either mania or dementia, it would be too much edge or too much narwhal bacons at midnight. But much like Florida, the bizarreness is brought alive by an abundance of seeming whimsy and unadulterated horror, each magnified by being in constant contrast to each other. It is not just that the setting is alien, but that it simultaneously retains a sense of place with everything contained within, much like its predecessor, Morrowind. Even more than 2 decades later, Morrowind still imparts on you the feeling of being a true outsider in its lands, without losing its believability as a living, breathing universe. The environment is alien and strange, yes, but it isn't just visually interesting set dressing. It reflects the lore, history, and ideologies of its inhabitants. When House Telvanni lives in giant mushroom towers, it isn't just a quirky, arbitrary aesthetic choice made because of rule of cool, nor is it a phallic reference, but both a visual testament to their mastery of the arcane, as well as their propensity for solitude. When House Imperial Cuckold lives in a largely empty manor in Balmora, most known for containing a dead guy to stash your loot on for free, it is a brilliant lore reference to how the Sirit glazing Envars ultimately end up living in a ramshackle farmstead in bumfuck Eastmarch. Morrowind is immersive because the world is a consistent and cohesive tapestry throughout. The unfamiliarity, the strangeness isn't just a thin veneer, it is the entire foundation for the Elder Scrolls setting and the lore of this particular region in Tamriel. The environment establishes the canvas, and the characters and quests bring it to life. Of course, several naked Nords roam the lands of Morrowind, complaining about witches stealing their clothes. Of course, area enchanters in Morrowind concoct amazingly dangerous experiments to save a few septims on their Silt Strider travel margins. Of course, incredibly dangerous demons are summoned to holy pilgrimage sites, specifically to be antagonized into threatening unwanted orifice spelunking on you. Shivering Isles succeeds likewise because the outlandishness is the foundation of the realm, rather than just an interesting aesthetic, not necessarily consistent with the lore of the setting. Dive deeper into the bifurcated region by doing the quests and speaking with the NPCs, and you'll find that the absurdity and chaos are not aberrations, but rather the foundation of its reality. While proving yourself worthy to be Sheogorath's champion, or rather to be Sheo himself, you are to relight the great torch that shines over New Sheoth and inspires hope in its subjects. Great. A standard RPG quest. Evict the monsters from the temple and do the ever-important ritual of some such. Except the temple is already firmly under control by Sheogorath's ride-or-die minions. Contrary to conventional video game logic, you have to pick sides between completely Sheo-loyal forces to determine who has the honor of actually completing Sheogorath's will. But it isn't just a choice of which aesthetic or demeanor you like, whether you prefer the goth femcel or manic BPD demon. Either way, she'll ruin your life. But rather, the quest allows you to explore the lore of the Daedra further. It is not about good or evil, despite the classic dark versus bright aesthetic, nor is it an inconsistent questline, since you'd logically think that servants of the same master should just band together and complete his will. But the visual split is exactly not just a visual quirk. Quests like relighting the Great Torch further establishes the divide between mania and dementia in how they present themselves or how they act practically, which further reinforces the chaotic insanity that is the Daedric Prince of Madness's realm versus the more grounded world of the mortal Cyrodiil. Daedra, like the Oriels and Masken, are more concepts taken to the extreme rather than us free-thinking mortals. They are in opposition because it is their entire being. To shape your own servants into rivalry is madness, but madness in of itself remains coherent with Sheogorath's underlying logic that is antithetical to order. By the end of the main questline, Sheo reveals that Jiggalak isn't just an invading Daedric prince, but rather that he is him. Cursed by rival Daedric princes, Jiggalak was damned to become Mad God Sheogorath, the antithesis of his very being, an existential concept of order, only allowed to revert to his true nature once each era. If the entire realm is contingent on the fractured psyche of the damned Jiggalak, now Prince of Madness, is it any wonder that the Isles and its inhabitants have shaped out the way and manner that they did?
The Shivering Isles are a reflection of our Lord Sheogorath, divided yet perfect.
The atmosphere of Elder Scrolls in general should never become generic, dull, and stagnant. The Shivering Isles expansion proves just how interesting you can make the atmosphere of a region based on the intricacies of a single Daedric prince. Take for instance the hill of YouTube community guideline violations. Here, tormented souls wander for all eternity because they didn't have the good sense to die in the manner that Lord Sheogorath prefers. As the name suggests, the hill is horrifying and depressive, mirroring much of what dementia represents. But the hill isn't just an isolated piece of world building meant to show how edgy and mature Shivering Isles is. Nearby is the town of Split. They would prefer not to coexist with the perfect living, breathing opposite of themselves, but are afraid to resort to violence, exactly because the nearby hill of Harakiri has established a most gruesome penalty. After all, you would technically be liquidating yourself, thus being damned to an eternity of hillside cliff racer watching. At face value, either location independently could be construed as quite ridiculous, but because the setting remains cohesive with what we've learned about Sheogorath and by extension the Shivering Isles, the outlandishness is a measure of absurdity and gruesomeness that both fits perfectly with the setting and remains consistent with its own established rules. You'll also find great shambling Frankenstein monstrosities, a throwback to Daggerfall in fact, but very unlike the wildlife and undead you'll otherwise find on the island. In the main quest, you'll be tasked with visiting a Dunmer sorceress, doing her best impression of Unit 731 for literally the entire day. It is never explicitly stated, but exploring the gruesome environment of her sanctum of fluffy kittens reveals her multitudes of experiments on test subjects, both dead and very much alive, and clearly indicates that she is the source for the shambling abominations. Nothing in Oblivion is quite as dark, either visually or lore-wise, as this particular area is. And Search in general, Relmina Shiro Ishi is particularly wicked, even by bad guy standards, but the type of atmosphere that Shivering Isles succeeds with is exactly what gives life an opportunity for these darker explorations into Elder Scrolls lore. This is of course because the realm realm is a true reflection of its master.
The Shivering Isles is what Sheogorath wills it to be.
Sure, he presents friendly and jovial, but scratch the surface and the Prince of Madness is someone else entirely. In the 16 Accords of Madness, stories detail how Sheo gains followers by outsmarting and betraying fellow Daedric princes and driving mortals to sheer insanity. Hircine, the Daedric prince of hunting and beasts, he challenges to a Pokemon trademark duel, each to bring forth spawns of their creation to do battle. Hircine brings forth a Daedric monstrosity infused with lycanthropy, undefeated by even his own greatest hunters, whereas Sheo presents only a tiny songbird. Hircine's beast lunges after the songbird, but the oblivious birdie only continues to mirthfully sing while it flies around, leaving Hircine's beast to exhaust itself to death. Vermina, the prince of dreams and nightmares, he challenges to see who can make a talented poet the most hated in the land, each having governance over the mortal for a full decade. Vermina, the prince of edgy DeviantArt pages, shows the poet immense visions of suffering, death, and abominations at night, which the sick fuck, of course, immediately monetizes as a successful horror YouTuber, gaining a massive fanbase. Sheo, on the other hand, does nothing. The bard's nightmares and visions cease from one night to another, and as a consequence his creative work suffers immensely and he falls off. Now considered boring by his former following, he becomes disillusioned with the existence of any gods, abandoned by his former muse as he is, and he starts publishing scathing drama exposés on both nobles, worshippers, and the public at large, gaining much more outrage than his previous salacious work did, resulting in him finally having his head lopped off and his soul condemned to the mad god's sphere, mania and dementia respectively. Lore-wise, this is who the true Sheogorath is, and it is perfectly encapsulated when you explore the Shivering Isles. True, Sheo can't exactly trap the protagonist in any of his usual games. He needs you, unless you happen to punch him, of course.
You really shouldn't have done that. Enjoy the view.
But that is why areas like Relmina's Japanese laboratory, Split, and the Hill of Sudoku are significant. The Shivering Isles aren't naturally occurring. You won't find such concentration of dementia outside of Eastern Bloc countries. But the best Elder Scrolls games present fantastical areas, environments, and artifacts, and weave them into the tapestry of the universe. Everything in the Isles exists because Sheo wills it to be so. The environment, atmosphere, and characters are all revealing exactly who the Prince of Madness is, without him having to explicitly tell us. The Croats of Split are driven to madness and kept in paranoia in the shadow of their potential fate, because that is how he gains and maintains followers. Relmina is allowed to pursue her mastery, because her pursuit has not only driven her into madness and insanity, but also helps drive other mortals into madness through her experimentations of pain. The land is so clearly divided in mania and dementia because that reflects perfectly the two sides of the Prince of Madness. We don't need Sheogorath to explicitly tell us who he is, when the entire world itself is taking every opportunity to show the depths of mania and dementia. It isn't just the levels of saturation, it is clear in the sheer amount of quests and NPCs we encounter that details what it means being in the Mad God's realm. The seeming randomness is a twisted corruption of order, where every strange detail reinforces the core themes of madness, duality, and the fragility of sanity and order. The environment is not just a backdrop, but an active participant in the narrative, a true reflection of what a mad mind made matter could look like. And this is exactly the strength, or rather what should be the strength, of Elder Scrolls. Not generic fantasy, but a setting that is amazingly alien without losing its immersive qualities. The environment looks bizarre for a reason. The characters are wild and contradictory for a reason. The struggle snuggle demon is present for a reason. Alright, that was a video. Thank you very much for watching. Throw me a like and subscribe if you feel like helping out with the big ol' algorithm. Comment down below which is your favorite Elder Scrolls game and why. I always enjoy reading and responding to comments. Support links in the bio, Patreon, and all that jazz. Until next time, which will probably be a nice indie game shooter.